Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Sushan.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we're heading out to Las Vegas, Nevada, but it's not a party. We are looking to talk independent journalism. Our guest this week is award-winning journalist Howard Stutz. He attended San Diego State late 70s, early 80s. He has had a prolific career in that time. He has worked in corporate communications. He owned his own communications firm. He had two different stints at the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He was a reporter. He was a columnist. He was part of the reporting team that uncovered who became the silent, secret owner of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. I cannot wait to talk to him about that. These days, he works for the Nevada Independent. He covers gambling, tourism, and sports business. Howard, thank you for being a guest and welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Hey, anything for San Diego State. Best years, one of the best years, some of the best years of my life down there, and made great connections. And it really propelled me into my journalism career. San Diego State. It really did. Well,
let's find out more about your journalism career. I want to start with what you're doing right now at the Nevada Independent. For people who don't know, it is a 501c3. Explain how the Nevada Independent came to be and basically what you guys do at this organization.
Well, the Nevada Independent, John Ralston, if anybody follow politics nationally, John Ralston is well known. He's the CEO, publisher, editor of the Nevada Independent. He founded it in 2017, mainly because, the change with the RJ, which we'll get into, but, the change in journalism, there was a need for independent journalism in Nevada. We've seen a lot of shrinkage in the news coverage of newspapers, TV stations. So John started the Nevada Independent, started out very small, really focused on politics, which is, where his bread and butter is. But it's expanded over the time. I started freelancing for it I would have joined immediately if I could have, but it was in between when I was in the corporate world, so to speak. But I started freelancing 2020 actually, for the Independent, covering gaming to give them some gaming coverage, because that's what I've done for the last, pretty much the decade. I was involved in covering the gaming industry in Nevada, and joined full time finally in May of 2021. And we've grown, and my beats have expanded, obviously, because not just gaming and tourism, but as you mentioned, sports business with the move of the A's to Las Vegas and the Raiders and the Golden Knights, and how sports has become so important in Las Vegas to the industry, to the tourism industry. I also cover legal cannabis, because it's a regulated industry. Decided, I cover gaming, which is a heavily regulated industry, so why not add legal cannabis in? Because that's a growing business here in Nevada, as it has been in California and other parts of the country.
It's interesting. When I was preparing to ask you these questions, I was thinking about when I was a student at San Diego State and thinking about what different things I want to cover. I don't think that covering the gambling industry would have ever come across my mind. But the more you think about it, we're talking multi-millions, if not billions. And if ever there is an industry that needs to be covered, it is gambling. And so kind of give us just your big picture view about the types of stories and the importance of covering this industry.
Well, it's funny because, okay, think about this. Okay, I started covering gambling actually in 1989. I had moved over from sports to the news side at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and they said, "Well, we're going to put you on the gambling beat, the gaming beat." It was gaming, casino beat, and it was like, okay. I was 29 years old, an old sports writer. I didn't know much about it. Now, at the time, legal casinos, legalized gambling was really only in two states, Nevada and just in Atlantic City, New Jersey. That was it. So the reporter at the time for the Atlantic City Press, a guy named Dan Hennigan, he and I used to joke we're the only two gambling reporters in the entire country. Well, it's changed dramatically, obviously. And I've never, when you see this industry, you think about how it's grown from where it became from Just, you think about Las Vegas and Atlantic City for the casinos. Casinos now are in like 40 something states because of, California. Tribal gaming is a huge, huge market. Tribal gaming actually, gaming revenues in that we know of, because they're not publicized, but there's used to be a couple of analysts that could pull them out, extrapolate them. California had a higher amount of gaming revenue than Nevada did than the Strip, because of the California tribal casinos. And they always thought tribal gaming coming in California is going to destroy Las Vegas. Well, you go back to when Atlantic City was legalized back in like 1979, 1980. Everybody's saying, oh, the Vegas is going to dry up, blah, blah, blah. Did not. All those companies ended up going to Atlantic City, opening casinos there. As gambling has expanded across the U.S., Las Vegas has flourished. So nothing can really touch Vegas because it's not just the gambling here, it's the attractions and everything we have. That's one of the things that I've seen change so dramatically, really in the last couple of decades. It's become more, we have pro sports. We have the entertainment industry is so much bigger now out here. You come to Vegas not to gamble. You can do that, in California, you can do that in New Mexico, you can do that anywhere. You come here for Vegas, for the entertainment. It's all the big events that draw events here. And then, we haven't even talked about the growth of sports betting across the U.S. If you could have told me back in 1990 that in 2023, 2024 in February, I would be going to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas to cover, the Super Bowl, I would have thought you need to have your head examined. It's crazy the way gambling is just intertwined now it's a huge industry, but it's an entertainment industry, and it's very well accepted, around the U.S. now.
And so along those lines, what are the stories that you look for in your mind? What are the most important stories about this multi-million-dollar industry that involves entertainment and gambling, in terms of what are the stories that the public needs to know about the gaming industry?
What we focus on is the business aspect. Taxes, it's a huge, it is the number one in Nevada. It's the number one provider of taxes in the state. Over half of the state budget comes from gaming taxes. But it's everything else that's now gone along with it is what we really focus on, what I try to focus on here, the changes. I mean, when you have with the pro sports and how sports betting was in Nevada, we were the only state with really full-scale legal sports betting up until 2018, when the Supreme Court overturned the PASPA Act, and which banned sports betting in every other state. That changed, and now Nevada's not really, you still think of Nevada with the big sports books and everything, but it's not the number one state for revenues coming from sports betting. It comes from those states are like the bigger states: New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Michigan. They provide much higher amount of revenue to the gaming industry in terms of sports betting. But it's just the changeover. What we look for, we kind of watch is the trends and the changes, and how does this affect other parts of Nevada and other businesses in Nevada. We see all the big restaurants coming in, these big venues, the Sphere. There's actually, I'm sure you've seen the videos of this project. This thing it cost more than Allegiant Stadium, where the Raiders play, cost about $1.9 billion. The Sphere, which holds 17,000, 18,000 people, that cost about $2.3 billion to build. And now they're going to build another one in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates now. It's not a casino, not a slot machine attached to it. You think about that. It's just this big entertainment venue. U2 performed here and just sold out shows, for months. Now you had the Grateful Dead, we have the Eagles. Now, I mean, it's those types of venues, those types of attractions that continue to bring, I guess, what is it, like 42 million, 43 million people to Las Vegas every year, and that's growing. We also do things different here about when we decide to get rid of a casino, we blow it up.
Make a big show about it.
Make a big show, have it at midnight. We've had 1 year they blew up the Hacienda on New Year's Eve and did that as a countdown for New Year's Eve. So it's just the change. I think it's just the way this town has changed, and it's also changed the community. When I moved here in '82, it was not even 1 million people living here. Now we got over 2 million, almost 3 million people living in Southern Nevada. So it's a big city. It's a big, it's a big Southwest community. It's really in the 40 plus years I've been here now. It's amazing to see how much this state has changed and how much it's not just a casino state. It's so much else going on in Nevada and in Las Vegas. That's really the change I've seen and how we go about covering gaming. Well, we don't cover it as a tourist. It's like a entertainment. You cover it in different ways, but I really cover it as a business now.
Mhm.
I mean, that's really the casino operators are publicly traded companies. That's really the way we cover it.
All right, so let's rewind to your time at San Diego State. I always like to ask people, why San Diego State and why journalism? So what's your story of why you went to San Diego State and wanted to study journalism?
Well, I started getting into journalism. I went to junior college first. Went to LA Pierce Junior College and community college, whatever they call it, whatever it's called down in LA. When I got out of high school, I grew up in Southern California, grew up in the San Fernando Valley, went to Pierce. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. I actually kind of I thought I might get into broadcast journalism. I thought that was where I might end up going. I met a fellow student who happened to be, this is like late 1970s, happened to be a Vietnam veteran. And I remember him talking to me. We were in a class together. I don't know what class it was, but we were talking about, and he said, I'm taking this journalism class. And it's kind of cool. So I moved into a journalism classes at Pierce the next semester, joined the school newspaper immediately, the Roundup, weekly newspaper, community college newspaper. You understand that I guess it's that team aspect. When you're in journalism, you're part of a team. And I think that was really what drew me to it. It was the interest. And I realized I liked writing as much as maybe do I want to go on TV? Do I want to do broadcast? I really liked writing. And I decided once I left Pierce and I knew I wanted to get out of LA. I had friends in San Diego State. And, I did some research. I went down there, looked at the school. How can you not fall in love with San Diego, obviously? And I got in contact with the guy who was the sports editor, the incoming sports editor of the Daily Aztec for the next semester. And he said, yeah, come on. If you come down here, come in, we'll figure out a role for you. And that's how it worked out. I joined, took some journalism classes. My old professors, my first professor was a guy named Martin Cruming, who I completely lost touch with. I don't know if he's still down there. He was a writer for the San Diego Transcript, which was a daily business publication in San Diego, and he was also taught journalism. And that was my first journalism class. I got really excited about it. Joined the Daily, had different roles at the Aztec. All my journalism classes had internships. The LA Times had a bureau in San Diego. I interned for the LA Times, interned for United Press International. People will be listening, going, the kids listening to this going, what's UPI? I mean, but it was it gave me the background I needed. Wasn't just my classes. There were some students that took journalism classes but didn't get practical experience. The Daily Aztec and my internships gave me the practical experience I needed to go out into the world and find jobs and find a job. And it was really I'm so glad I went to San Diego State and did that. I learned a lot, got away from home, but also learned a lot. Met people I'm still friends with today that are in journalism. We all came through the Daily Aztec, and some are still in journalism, some are out, some are retired. I'm still going at it, so I'm not retired yet. So, but it really was. That set me on. That's probably one of the best decisions I made in my life, is to go, other than getting married and my daughter and everything, but going to San Diego State and propelling me.
So speaking of, getting the skills to get jobs, how'd you end up in Las Vegas? Who doesn't want to stay in San Diego their entire life? How'd you end up in Las Vegas and get started with your career as a professional?
Well, the same sports editor of the Daily Aztec was now a sports writer at the Las Vegas Sun. And I contacted him. I said, John, his name is John Schumacher. He's since left journalism years ago. I lost touch with John, but he actually worked several different markets. John Schumacher, he covered, I think one of the last was up in the Bay Area. He covered the 49ers for a long time. But John, I said, you're working for the Sun. Is there openings? He said, we have one. Why don't you apply? And I did, but at the time they couldn't fill the opening yet. Graduated, had gone off, and I was back home in the San Fernando Valley, and I started writing for small newspaper, covering high school sports, this Thousand Oaks News Chronicle, and covering high school sports in the San Fernando Valley for a while until I ended up moving up to Vegas once the Sun had an opening, hired me as a sports writer, covering a minor league basketball team called the Las Vegas Silvers of a league that no longer exists, and in an arena that no longer exists, the old Las Vegas Convention Center. So it got me up here, and I just kind of moved up on my beats in Vegas, and Vegas became a good vehicle, a good place to be at that time. You had two very hotly competing newspapers, the Las Vegas Sun, where I started, and then the Las Vegas Review-Journal, where I eventually went. So it was a hotbed of journalism market for a young reporter who was looking to go back to California, but I never did. I just stayed up here and just continued my career.
So there's a lot of things that Howard has done in his career that we could focus on, but I want to get to this story from 2016. And This is when Howard was working for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And as it turned out, Sheldon Adelson and his family secretly bought the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And you mentioned the team aspect of journalism, Howard. Describe for us you and your teammates at the RG, and basically give us the background of discovering that you have a new owner of your paper. You're not writing about the Las Vegas Sun, you're writing about your own paper, and what it took to find out and why this story mattered.
Well, let's go back to 2015, when it actually took place. April 2015, the Review-Journal, long owned by Don Ray, it was now Stevens Media, was sold to a company called Gatehouse. And it's a small company. Gatehouse is big now, but at the time, small company. They bought the Review-Journal and all of Stevens Media for $106 million. So they were a public company. They had to announce that. So we're working with Gatehouse. It looks like we're going to grow. Gatehouse owned a lot of papers around the country. I talked to them, the publisher, the editors, about national gaming coverage, for us. And we kind of had that discussion and kind of went away. So you fast forward to December, we have our monthly all staff meeting with the publisher. And he makes an announcement in the middle of the meeting that, oh, by the way, we've been sold. Now, I'll take you back. Let me step back a couple of seconds. I missed a point here. We go to this all staff meeting. My editor, Jim Wright, comes walking in. He sits down. I'm with another reporter, Jennifer Robeson, and we're sitting there. And turns to us, and he looks at me. He says, "You're going to write a 1A story about this meeting." And Jennifer has this look, and I looked at him. I said, "Seriously, Jim, Jason's Happy Horse. That's what we're going to write about." And he said, "Do you have a notebook?" And I went, "Yeah." And I realized he was serious. And Jennifer looks at him and goes, "We've been sold, haven't we?" And Jim turns around. So the meeting goes on. Jason makes an announcement that we've been sold. There's like a hush over the room. And he says, "We've been sold to this company called News Plus Media." Never heard of it. This guy gets up, says he's the manager of News Plus Media. And Jennifer described him as, he looked like Peter Griffin from Family Guy. that's what he looked like. And he makes a statement that will live in the annals. He goes, when our editor at the time asked him, who's the owners? Who is News Plus Media? He says, "You don't need to know you don't need to know who your owners are. You just need to do your jobs." And you might as well throw raw meat to a bunch of starving lions. And I knew at that time, this is probably going to cost me my job, I think, but we're going to report it. We can't do this. I can't cover the gaming industry and not knowing if a casino company owns the newspaper. And we had an inkling it was Sheldon Adelson. He wanted to buy the RJ before. He hated the RJ, hated the ownership. He sued one of our columnists into bankruptcy. He was that type of person. And it took us a team, myself, Jennifer, James DeHaven, Eric. There was a whole team, about 5-6 of us. And we put it together. And I will always remember, we were leaning towards Sheldon. We were trying to tie it all together. And I get a text one morning from a source who says, have you looked at the son-in-law? Son-in-law. I was like, who's the son-in-law? Sheldon's got and I did the digging, found the name of the son-in-law. It turned out he's an executive with Sands in some financial capacity. Worked on other sources, said, yeah, he handles all the Adelson family investments, and we confirmed it. And sure enough, we posted the story that night. An hour after we posted the story that Sheldon Adelson had bought the RJ, the Adelson family admits it. They put out a statement. We put it not in our story. We posted it separate on our site, on the website, and on the news printed paper at the time that this happened. And what really spelled it out was, and I said earlier, Gatehouse paid $106 million for all of Stevens Media. So they had to disclose as a public company when they sold the RJ what the buyer paid for. They disclosed the buyer bought the RJ and two little papers in Pahrump in rural Nevada, the entire for $140 million. And I looked at him, I said, whoever bought us spent way more than Gatehouse did to buy the entire company. I mean, this is insane. And we were a good mid-sized newspaper, but not worth $140 million. And so who would do that? Well, the only person to do that is the third richest man in the world, Sheldon Adelson, who has $140 million laying around in his seat cushions, in his couch cushions at his house. So it was a stunning development. And I knew my time was not going to last there. I did not have a good relationship with Sheldon Adelson. I covered Las Vegas Sands. I said, I can't cover this company. How am I going to cover this company that's owned by the guy who owns the paper? But then I eventually, realized I wasn't, my life was not going to be fun. And I made a decision and left. Took a job of all places, a law firm that to be the business development person, how I was doing, but I just did it because it got me out of there. But I never got journalism out of my blood. I had left the RJ back in the 90s and went to work in PR. It took me, I guess I'm a little slow. It took about 12 years to realize I wasn't good at PR, and I didn't like it. And I got back into journalism, went back to the RJ. I'll point out, if you don't mind pointing this out, a gentleman named Charles Zobel. He was the city editor of the RJ in 1987 and hired me over from the Sun to the RJ. Charlie, in 2004, brought me back to the RJ when he was managing editor. Fought for me to come, but when others didn't want me to come back because I had been in PR and nobody does that. You don't do that. He fought for me and brought me back. I point this out. Charlie was just inducted into the Nevada Newspaper Hall of Fame. Tragically, 2 days before he was to be inducted, he passed away he had illness that we all didn't know about. He passed away. So I had the honor of discussing him and his career at the Hall of Fame banquet up in Reno. But that's somebody who was integral, who saw my talent still in journalism even after I left and brought me back into it. So that's something you can do that. You can leave journalism and come back. I don't know if you can now. It's very, everything shrunk so much right now. But, going back to the RJ revived my career and until the Adelson family bought the RJ, and that kind of put me on hold for a little bit. So eventually, a couple of years later, that's when I joined the Nevada Independent.
I think this is fairly obvious, but I still want to follow up a little bit more just in terms of why it matters that you need to know who the owner of the newspaper is, and especially when it's someone who does have the ties, and why the Adelson family didn't want it to be known. Like, why was it a big deal that it was a secret for them? And then why was it such a big deal that it became uncovered? I know this is an obvious question, but that's what we do in journalism, is we ask obvious questions.
Right. And this is a company, Sheldon Adelson, at the time, before he passed away in 2021, the family, and the family has since sold. They owned the Venetian Palazzo, Venetian Exec Conference Center. They were, one of the biggest players on the Las Vegas Strip. I covered the Las Vegas Strip, these companies. I need to know. I mean, if I write a story about Las Vegas Sands, And then we find out later on that they're the owner. And okay, boys, I did not know, and I was hiding something. You have to. It's transparency. That was the whole nature of the whole thing. You have to be transparent as journalists. You have to be transparent in any we the Nevada Independent. We disclose we're 501(c) as you said. We disclose all our donors. If you look at one of our stories, if I mention somebody that's a company or a person who's donated to us, it's at the bottom of the story that a donor, who the donors are and how much. So we disclose everything. Is that transparency? That is something that's very important to us. It's very important to a journalist. And we didn't feel like we had to figure out who the owner was. Once we found out who it was, it became very, it's going to be an issue, for me to cover the gaming industry. The Sands Corporation wasn't liked by other gaming companies. And am I going to be influenced by that in my coverage? And so it just became much, much harder for me to do that. Now the Sands, the Adelsons still own the RJ. They have since the family sold the paper, but I didn't sell the paper, excuse me. They've sold the casino company, but they're trying to put casinos. The Adelsons are trying to put casinos in Texas right now. Miriam Adelson is the majority owner of the Dallas Mavericks. She bought out part of 70% of it from Mark Cuban, and she has also given over $100 million to former President Trump's campaign. The Las Vegas Review-Journal endorsed President Trump. Shocker. As we've gone on here, we've seen the stories about the LA Times and Washington Post not doing endorsements when the editorial boards were going to endorse Vice President Harris. It's that transparency that's out there, and it's just been glossed over at the RJ now. That's why we are very transparent. Every nickel we receive in a contribution to the Nevada Independent, we disclose it. So that's what's so important about it, if that makes sense. Why I left, the RJ at the time, and am very happy with what I'm doing now.
I know this is not easy because you've worked as a journalist for so long, but that's a huge story that you did. Is there another story that you're really proud of in terms of what it took to get the story and the long-lasting impact of a story that you told at some point in your career?
Well, I go back, the one story that I worked on, it was very important, was in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the South, hit Mississippi, New Orleans. And that year, right after it happened, was right around the same time as the Global Gaming Expo, which is a huge gaming conference that happens in Vegas. And the head of the American Gaming Association said at the time that what happened with Hurricane Katrina was the biggest disaster to ever hit the casino industry, because it wiped out, destroyed like 10, 12 casinos, much the Mississippi gaming market. Many of those casinos were owned by Nevada companies, Caesars, MGM. So I went to the editor of the RJ and I said, we need to go down there. This is an important story because it's important. We're covering the gaming industry. We're the leading newspaper that covers the gaming industry. We have to go down there. So my photographer and I went down there, and we spent a week in basically the disaster zone, and came back with, I wrote a week, like a seven-part package on what happened in Mississippi, and went back a year later, went back at the 10-year anniversary to chronicle how things changed. And it was important because it also showed, because you asked about the gaming industry, the casino industry, is important because it showed how the casino industry helped rebuild a community. Once they got the gaming industry back up, the jobs came back, people wanted to come back. Biloxi, Mississippi, that whole area is kind of I think they call it the Redneck Riviera. It's a very nice area along the Gulf Coast. It came back, and it's rebounded back to I think beyond where it was. And it was something that I felt proud of, going down there and doing that. Now I can talk about most recently the Oakland Athletics moving to Las Vegas. That has been
let's get to that.
I'm working on right now. That it continues to change every seems like change every week. But I've been very proud of that in the last year, the coverage we've done for the Nevada Independent on the A's.
Yeah, so let's talk more about the A's. So you had the Vegas Golden Knights were this expansion team for the NHL. You had the WNBA Aces. The Raiders come to Las Vegas, and now the Oakland A's have announced that they're coming to Las Vegas. Still don't have all of the financing that's involved. Still don't know exactly when, what year. Still don't have a lot of different things. So take us through some of the challenges that has been with this story when it comes to public financing. I know there's a teachers lobby that's very influential, trying to become even more influential, about the different layers of stories that are involved, because it's not just rah, Las Vegas is getting a new baseball team. It's who is paying for this and how does this impact tax dollars?
Well, that was the big, see, that's the way we looked at it. I mean, we looked at it as the first, as for 2 years, the A's were announced they were looking at Vegas, or they were basically playing Vegas against Oakland, on how they were going, what they were going to do, because they wanted a stadium in Oakland, but they didn't want to pay for it. They wanted, the city to pay for it. The city of Oakland, I think the county offered, they had the Howard Terminal lined up as a site, or redevelop, they didn't want to redevelop the Coliseum, but, so they were doing that. They were playing both sides. They finally settled on a site in Vegas right during the legislative session. Then in 2023, then they moved that site over to the Tropicana because of issues with that site, with the previous site. So it evolved from is the A going to come to a legislative issue, and it's financial issue as it's going on. The media here, a lot of the media became, started raising the pom-poms. Hey, we're going to get baseball. We're going to get, just that way with the Raiders and the Raiders Stadium. Allegiant Stadium was funded through a combination of the Raiders, outside investors, and $750 million in room tax money. They raised the rate on the room tax up like less than 1%. At the hotel room tax. So anytime you stayed in a Vegas hotel room, 88 cents of that dollar, of $1 went toward, building the stadium, 750 million. That was at the time, I guess, the largest room tax or largest public financing of a stadium I think we've seen. I think Buffalo has now surpassed it, the stadium they're building for the Bills. The A's originally were asking for $500 million in tax money, and it wasn't room tax. It was a combination of bonds and some kind of incremental tax increase. It's a very convoluted method. It's not just plain room tax. And there was a lot of debate on it in the legislature. The bill initially didn't even make it out of the legislature after the A's testified. They made it. It came back in a special session, and it was approved. But they reduced it from $500 million in public money to $380 million in public money. The A's have since said they're willing to do $350 million in public money, and they're going to finance the rest. How they're financing that is still to be determined. Now, they have a site, the Tropicana, the site where the Tropicana Hotel did sit. The Trop was closed in April. It was imploded early October. I got to watch that at 2:30 in the morning. The A's were there. We have renderings. They have a plan with Bally's Corporation that'll involve a dome stadium and a hotel integrated resort complex, all on this 35-acre site. The plan is the site will be cleared by the end of the year because the Trop's gone. I mean, they're just got to clear off all the debris. April's supposed to be a groundbreaking, and then a 3-year building process. The A's are expected by December to at least show what the plan is. Now, they've talked in generalities about the plan. $300 million, $350 million public money, $300 million from investors, and then the Fisher family will finance the other $850 million. How they finance it, we don't really know. So that's really so that's what we're waiting on and to hear. Media here kind of, got the RJ especially raised the pom-poms. They're excited about, we're going to, we could have, with the talk being of an NBA expansion coming here, Vegas in less than 10 years, 15 years, could have all 4 major sports here. If the NBA comes here and Major League Baseball comes, we already have the NFL and the NHL. So, and the WNBA, don't forget them. So it's a story that's just evolved with the A's because it's not clear. The Raiders, once they got Allegiant Stadium approved, Allegiant Stadium's done everything they promised. Not only did it bring the NFL, bring a lot of special events, it brought the Super Bowl to the point where Super Bowl is probably going to, the NFL, which always shunned Vegas, is probably going to come back here in about 5 years with another Super Bowl. So it changed. Will a 33,000 seat, $1.5 billion ballpark, Major League Stadium on the Strip have the same impact? We don't know. I mean, they're talking about, there's a lot of questions. Maybe you've seen the plans. I mean, it's they're kind of jamming a lot onto the site. So there's a lot to be determined. But for now, the A's are leaving Oakland. And as of today, as we're taping this, the Dodgers have won the World Series. The Major League season is over. So the name Oakland is going away. It's now going to be, the team's going to be called the Athletics or the A's, and we'll be playing up in Sacramento at a 14,000 seat minor league ballpark that I know you've been to and broadcasted games from. They're going through some development there with it, and we'll see how this all works. But that's at least 3 years now before we'll see the A's here in Vegas.
It's a fascinating topic. I could spend hours talking to you about it, Howard, and maybe we will at some point as well. But for purposes of this podcast, I want to touch on a couple of other things before we wrap things up. When you just think about gambling, tourism, sports business, what are the biggest lessons that you would want to impart to future journalists about these are industries that are kind of fun, right? You think about Las Vegas and it's fun, right? You go there, you have a good time. But the most important lessons when you're covering industries that are entertainment based and what really matters.
We're doing a lot. I'm kind of happy in the sense in the last year or 2 years, we focused a lot on the problem gambling aspect. Gaming industry has invested money into research and education on problem gambling, more so in the last couple of years than they did, they started doing this 10, 15, 20 years ago. So there's a hook with that industry that you have to kind of watch. And it's being discussed now. Sports betting launched nationwide in 2018. It's now in 39 states. California, that's a whole other can of worms. But sports betting, there's been now a lot of talk, the ads. I mean, you can't watch an NFL game or anything without just being bombarded with the DraftKings and the FanDuels, Caesars ads, and BetMGM. So there's a lot of discussion now on how do you scale it back, because there's been so much interest and so much attention spent to it. That's the way this industry has changed. I mentioned earlier how Vegas has changed. You think about it, Vegas, when you look at the overall revenues that are provided, the Gaming Control Board breaks this out every year. It's an abstract. It shows the overall revenue provided by the gaming industry to the state in terms of tax revenue. Gaming is only 40% of it now. The other 60% of the hotel room taxes, the sales taxes on services, restaurants, everything, all these ancillary, the entertainment, non-gaming entertainment, all these ancillary businesses that get into these big major resorts, it's changed the market. Whereas other states, the casino to the tax revenue is 80% of it is the casino, and 20% of it is the other aspect of it. That's what's really changed in Vegas and changed in some other markets too. Like probably Atlantic City's tried to do this, where gaming is not the primary focus. It's a focus, but it's not the primary focus. It's the non-gaming aspect of it. And these are gaming industry. These companies are multi-billion-dollar businesses that you watch are publicly traded. They're looked at by the financial industry. I barely passed math in college. I've taken, here I am. I'm covering, I've been covering, the stock market and these major public companies that do quarterly earnings, and you follow that. It's a big change in the way, in the time that I've been covering this and how we look at covering these gaming companies. And I think that's something to look at as gaming expands and will to expand in other states, especially sports betting, how you go about covering it, the human aspect of it too. Problem gambling is important to kind of watch and research. There's a big fight on whether casinos should have smoking. Vegas still allows smoking, but you have a lot of markets around the country. Smoking is not allowed in the casino. it's a refreshing. It's a change, how this industry changes. That's what keeps me going and keeps me watching it all these years.
So you stole my final question, which would be,
Yeah.
what does keep you going, after all of these years and all of these different assignments? And, I know you started to answer that. I'd love what you said earlier about that journalism really never leaves you once it's inside you.
I'm enjoying, I'm 65. Well, I always point out that the CEO, John Ralston, I'm 4 months older than John. So I'm the oldest person on the staff. I'm working with a lot of young reporters. A lot of us are first time in journalism, first jobs out of college. It's invigorating because, and I learned from them. We don't do things the old way. I showed them a photo. Somebody dug up a photo. I wish I had it to show you. It was from the old Daily Aztec newsroom in like 1979. And I'm sitting there on a phone with a cord, and it's got a couple of lines on it, the push button phone with the lines. And there's an electric typewriter behind me. And there's another photo of a bunch of people. They're all writing on manual typewriters, or a couple of electric typewriters. We were the first Daily Aztec staff to get computers. It's changed. And now I'll sit here with three reporters. The first A story that we broke, there were three of us working on the story in a Google Doc all at the same time. And with the Slack channel going, where we're talking to each other, we're writing, we're all taking sections. That's the change in journalism, and it's fun. it keeps it new and fresh, and we're not waiting. I remember years ago when I was at the RJ and we started changing over with the internet, with the website, RJ website. I asked the editor, I said, will we ever break a story on the website? He said, no, we'll always break it in the morning paper. Not the same anymore. Everything's broken on. Everything's immediate. Boom, you're up. How quickly can we get this up on the website as fast as we can? So that's how much it's changed, and it's a kind of an invigorating. It's still invigorating. I'm still going to do this for a few more years. I don't have any. I don't. My daughter's a lawyer now in Phoenix. I don't know. My wife's a retired lawyer, retired judge. I'm still working. I'm enjoying it. So it's a lot of fun. I hope I can encourage San Diego State students, journalism students, continue on that path,
I love your energy and your stories and the fight. You're fighting the good fight in the name of journalism. So that is great, Howard. We like to wrap things up on the podcast by bragging about other San Diego State alums. It can be any industry, really. It's most convenient if they're a journalist or they're also working somewhere in communications. Whether you know them or whether you don't know them, we like to shout out other people from our university that are making us proud. So who'd you like to shout out?
Well, I'm going to shout out a few people. Ed Graney, who is former sports editor of the Daily Aztec, is probably one of the top. He's the sports columnist here in Vegas. He works for the Review Journal. We laugh because when San Diego State was in the Final Four and Butler hit the shot to win the game and put us in the national championship game, Ed said he was at the press table and he was like, and he froze. He was like, I can't cheer. And the UNLV basketball coach was sitting behind him. But I want to shout out Ed, a woman by the name of Tina Sussman, who we were classmates at San Diego State. Tina, I'm not sure what she's doing now. Last I knew, she was in New York. She worked for the Associated Press, UPI. She was a foreign correspondent in South Africa at the fall of when apartheid fell and Nelson Mandela. She interviewed him. She's somebody I've kind of lost touch with, but I know she's back east. She's somebody I want to shout out to. Frank Mickadite, who I worked with at the Daily Aztec. He went up becoming one of the top columnists in Orange County for the Orange County Register, but he's now a lawyer. He gave up journalism, went to law school, and he's now a lawyer in Orange County. I haven't talked to Frank in a while. And I'll throw out to my old friend, Vince Troya, who is in Nashville, Tennessee, was the former editor of the Daily Aztec. We worked together. We was editor at the same time I was, but he worked for a long time in journalism in Nashville. He's pretty much retired now, but he was worked for the different newspapers, community papers in Nashville when he moved there with his wife. And so I'll give those shout outs there to them.
I like all of it. Yeah. And it once again just goes to show how much the friends you make in college, especially on something like a campus newspaper, just become lifelong friends. And I could tell many, many stories of a similar thing with me during my time in the 90s at the Daily Aztec, and how all of them are still some of my dearest friends to this day.
I haven't been back there. I mean, the old Daily Aztec newsroom we have a photo. We took a staff photo one year in Aztec Bowl. Well, that's where Viejas Arena is built. And we're sitting in the vault. We brought out one of the computers and sat it down. We did like a photo on the football because it was still a football field at the time. Now it's Viejas Arena. And I'll get to a game here when the Aztecs play UNLV. It'll be fun. I'm going to the football game. UNLV's football team is really good this year, and the Aztecs will be here in a couple of weeks. I'm just going to be sitting here when I'm just like this, and amongst all the UNLV fans, but I don't watch them. But it'll be it's I want to get down and see Snapdragon Stadium and see some games down there. But it's fun to be an Aztec. Oh, Aztec for life, right?
Absolutely. Aztec for life. All right, Howard. Thanks so much for being generous with your time. Get back to work, fighting the good fight for journalism. And once again, thank you for being on the Where You At podcast.
Thanks, Josh. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Once again, his name is Howard Stutz. My name is Josh Sushan. I'm your host from the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening. Go Aztecs. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.